This is Emily Blackshear with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at the OSU Library. Today is Wednesday, November 13th, 2019, and I'm in Wagoner, Oklahoma this morning interviewing Traci Sorell for the Deep Roots Oklahoma Authors Oral History Project. Traci, you're an award-winning children's book author, a former federal Indian law attorney and policy advocate, and an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Wado, thank you.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Claremore, Oklahoma, north of here, and I grew up in a number of small towns in northeastern Oklahoma. We lived in Claremore for a while. Then we were in Chakotah for about 9 months, and that was the only time I lived outside of the Cherokee Nation as a child. We moved up to Owasso and then Talala, to Nowata, Bonita, back to Nowata, Bartlesville, back to Nowata. So we moved around quite a bit. And then as a teen, I lived in Poway, California. And that's where I graduated from high school.
Okay. Yeah. Could you describe Cherokee Nation, just the towns around here, especially for people who maybe aren't familiar?
So the Cherokee Nation's district is 14 counties within northeastern Oklahoma. And I was born in Rogers County, which is northeast of Tulsa, and spent most of my childhood there, and then in Nowata and Craig County. Now I live on the western, kind of the central western edge of the Cherokee Nation in Wagoner County.
All right. Yeah. How would you describe the landscape?
Very, very hilly, and lots of creeks and rivers, and then man-made lakes that were produced, kind of after the Dust Bowl and times of that. So I spent my childhood in the woods and near water all the time. Yeah, and there's a variety of trees, maples and hickories. Of course, we have redwoods and I love pecan trees. We have lots of pecan groves in the Cherokee Nation.
Yeah. When you were little, what do you remember about maybe playing outside? Did you grow up with like chickens around and things like that?
We alternated between living in town and living out in the country. So whenever we were out in the country, we definitely had a variety of animals. And when we lived in town, we pretty much were relegated to cats and dogs as pets. But out in the country, before I, really was like walking and running and stuff, I had been, on a horse, and we had horses, we had geese and chickens. So, that was just kind of normal in my childhood. But then, like I say, when we lived in town, then we would have, just dogs and cats. So it was a variety. But I always grew up around family who had a variety of animals. And outside time, growing up in the 70s and, early 80s as a child, you spent all your time outside, except obviously when there was bad weather. Meaning it had to be like lightning and thundering, because even when it was snowing, we wanted to be outside all day. Right. And, parents definitely were like, get out of the house. The screen door gets locked. It didn't matter if you were over at a friend's house or your grandparents or whatever. They'd be like, get outside. And so, we're out all day long, unless it's mealtime. And I really cherish those memories of, inventing all kinds of games and, playing with cousins or playing with the neighbor kids, and then when we were, of course, out in the country and, friends aren't, living right next to you because there's quite a bit of land in between you. Then my brother, I have a younger sister and brother. So then it'd be the three of us, inventing games and playing, and just a lot of wonderful time spent outside, from catching fireflies and letting them go to collecting locust shells off of the fence, just stuff that, I don't know, sit in the back porch, with your mom, like snapping green beans. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you like to write plays or make your siblings participate in creative things like that?
We constantly came up with things. So when we got a handheld cassette tape recorder, we would interview each other. We would,
really?
We would make tapes, and we would act like we were radio DJs. We did all kinds of stuff. We, of course, always played school, or we might play church, or, acting like, of course, we hadn't been on an airplane, but we would act like we'd gone on an airplane, and so what that might be like to go on an airplane, which I laugh now because, the reality of that and what we were doing was two different things. But we just had a lot of fun. There was a lot of imaginative play, and we were never, when people talk about like kids being bored, I was like, I'm sure that we complained about being bored, but we really weren't, because we all just, whether it was outside making up games or inside, and we made up a lot of different kinds of games, outside. We could entertain ourselves for hours.
Yeah. And did you enjoy reading? Do you have some favorite books that you could talk about? I think I've read a little bit in your author bio about Judy Blume.
Yes.
Yeah.
I definitely loved reading. My mom always read to us before bed, and she would also tell us stories. And I come from a family, on both sides of my family, native and the non-native side, that are storytellers. So there's certainly, Cherokee people in my family who can spin good yarns, as well as the other side. And, but I've been in love with story my whole life. And, in terms of when I went to school, I definitely did not see, native people in those stories, Cherokee or otherwise. And it's funny now because people will point to these problematic books when I was a kid. And I was like, I didn't read those. And I don't know why I didn't read them, but, they'll say, Island of the Blue Dolphin. I was like, I never read that book, the Little House series. Maybe I read one book, but I don't remember it. If I did, it was boring and I didn't read the rest of the series, So, but Judy Blume, Beverly Cleary are definitely two authors that I read all of their books, They were kids on adventures, they were having fun and doing fun things. And I definitely related to that. Even though, like certainly in the case of some of Judy Blume's characters, I was not having any of those experiences, living in an urban area. I was in, small rural towns. But I've always been curious about other people and other things. I loved reading biographies too, even though back in the day they were so boring the way they were written. But it would fascinate me to, read about. And there weren't as many about women, unfortunately. But when I could get my hands on one of those, I was like, oh, what were they doing? But I'm grateful that I had a librarian at school who really encouraged us to read. And we also had, the public library that we would always go to and check out books. So I feel like my mom and my grandma both modeled reading for me. And so I would say, on my Cherokee side of the family, there had been people that had been school teachers, and they didn't, have 4-year degrees. They had gone to high school and then done a little bit of other classes, and were teaching at schools here, throughout the 14 counties. But education, is prized for Cherokee people. And I certainly saw that on, like I say, my mom's side of the family, and her and my grandma would exchange books all the time. And so I just saw it as something very natural to do in your free time. And that's something that you would always choose to do. It was a normal hobby and way to spend your time. So it was easy for me to lose myself in books. And I think that now when I look at the variety of books that kids have, I'm jealous, because I would have loved those books as a child, and the ability to, see myself as a Cherokee child, but also to read about other tribes, in ways that are culturally, appropriate, but then also just to read about kids from other backgrounds, because the majority of literature at that time was very white. It still is, unfortunately, but there are more choices and there's a growing amount. And so that is where my jealousy comes in, is that kids now, have really dynamic writing that they can lose themselves in.
Yeah, and those early experiences with reading or just with people in your family telling stories is also important. Are there any stories that stand out to you that maybe you heard about with the Cherokee side of your family that you remember hearing when you were young that made an impression or that inspired you to write what you ended up writing later?
I think, we just had many stories of family members who always persevered despite the odds, and just hearing stories. My grandmother and I would spend hours, and she had wonderful photo albums, which I have now, pictures of our family, going back to, prior to allotment. So this is before 1900. And there are these wonderful photos. And so she would talk to me about who was in the photos and the things that they had done. And it just made this impression on me that it's like, there are a number of people who have, come before me and have taken good care of their families. They've been good contributors to the community, and they've done a number of things, and that's the expectation of me as well. So as a child, I was always much more knowledgeable about who my Cherokee relatives were and that side of the family, and connected to those stories. And it's why I think it disturbed me after I had my son, and I was like, okay, where are the books about contemporary Cherokee people? Yeah. Because we're still here contributing. We're still here taking care of our families and our communities, and yet that's not represented in books for kids. And by this time it should be. It's we're in the 21st century, and why isn't that visible?
Right. Yeah. And we'll come back to that, but I want to go backwards just a little bit. Sure. You were describing yourself a little bit as a child. Could you tell me what sorts of things you like to do? You like to sing, is that right?
Yes.
And act and read and...
Yeah, both of, my parents, actually they met with their respective churches. They had done kind of an exchange where one's choir had gone to the other, and the other's the youth choir had gone to the other one. And so we always grew up surrounded by music. When we were in the car, music was on. When we were at home, music was on. So whether it was records or 8-tracks, and then later, cassettes, there was always music in our house. So we would sing at church. I did a number of plays at church, and I would do, solos or duets with my mom. The same thing with school. I had been in the choir. I was in plays at school. When we lived there in Nowhat, I went over to Bartlesville, and I was in community theater there. So it was just something that I enjoyed doing. I didn't have any fear of being on the stage or singing. I mean, you always have those butterflies in the initial stage fright, but it wasn't a... It was a passing thing. I really enjoyed interacting with other people on the stage and being a character. It's kind of like, being in the story, right? In the book, that you're living out this different person. But musical theater, I prefer to just doing plays. I really enjoyed being able to sing. And it's something that I still sing, but mostly in the car now.
Yeah.
Sometimes at school visits, I'll sing.
You can YouTube it, right? Put it on your author Instagram. Okay, new idea right there. Brainstorming.
There we go.
So when you were in high school and you were in California, did you have dreams of going to Hollywood and being an actor? Or?
Those dreams happened when I was here. When I was growing up here, I was like, I'm going to be an actress or an attorney, and I'm going to go to UCLA. And, the funny thing is I look back on that and I'm like, where did that come from? Because no one in my family had gone to, gotten a 4-year degree. So I was like, I'm not sure where that came from. But the funny part is, my parents divorced. They both remarried. My mother's second husband had a brother in San Diego we went to visit, and my mom's like, oh, I love it here. We've got to move here. And 3 months later we did. So once I actually lived out there, it was a huge culture shock because living here, in smaller towns and having my family, having lived here since the time of removal, like you didn't go anywhere without someone saying, oh, you're, Mary's granddaughter, you're, Alan's niece. I mean, all of these people are relating you to who you're related to. And so you're this known entity. And when I moved out there, no one knew me. So it was odd. And then it was even more odd that no one knew that I was a Cherokee citizen or what Cherokee people were. They weren't even really aware of the tribes in San Diego County and in surrounding counties there, had any kind of knowledge about them. And of course, this is before the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act was passed in 1988. So I got out there, and there were so many more things that one could be involved in and interested in. And I did do, funny enough, because I moved out there just before my 8th grade year, they did the play Oklahoma at my middle school. I mean, what kind of sign is that? So I was Ado Annie. And I did one play in high school, but it was not a musical. And that was it. I never really thought about that again in terms of like a career path. And I certainly didn't think about being an attorney either. I came out of high school thinking that I was going to be a business major because I had been involved with Future Business Leaders of America, and I had gotten involved with like yearbook. I did love writing, and doing the layouts of the pages and writing articles about. I was the sports editor my sophomore year and the associate editor my junior year. But I thought I was going to be a business major, which again I laugh at now, because once I went to college, I didn't end up studying that at all. I ended up being a Native American Studies major, and really enjoyed the law and policy part of it and the history, because it gave me an opportunity to see the broader impact of U.S. law and policy. As a child growing up, I knew what had happened to my ancestors through the Trail of Tears and having to come here and regroup and reform the government, right? And then allotment happens and people are moved to different places based on where their allotment's at. A number of people, lose their land, especially during the Great Depression and stuff. But I had no idea that there's this larger systemic, policies that are impacting all these different tribes, and different tribes in different areas have very different histories. So it was a wonderful introduction for me to see what has happened across the nation, to Native nations and their citizens.
So when you started college, did you go into it thinking that that's what you would end up studying, or did you end up having a class with a professor that inspired you and that's how you ended up?
I applied to colleges based on the fact that I was going to be a business major.
Okay.
And so I ended up at UC Berkeley. They have a very good business school. And but for my English class, I could take Native American literature. And I was like, well, I'm absolutely going to take that. That sounds great. And so when I get in that class, the professor's like, well, there's the whole course of Native Studies. So for those of you who are interested, there's more than just the literature. You can take history. There's a federal and law and policy. There's all these classes. And I was like, what? And at the same time, I went to the business school's orientation when I first got there about here's what you need to take for the next 2 years so you're ready to declare a business major. And they said, you've got to have stats and calc and computer science course. And so I had signed up for the computer science course. And like the lowest level, it was like computer science 3. Well, it wasn't based on E's or anything. That's just the number it had. But it was Unix programming. And I was like, what is this?
Wow.
And I had, gone through pre-calc in high school, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do calculus and statistics. Like, what kind of major is this? What am I doing to myself, And I could not get excited excited about it. I mean, once I went to the literature course and found out there was like this whole major that was Native Studies, and looked at the coursework, and I went and talked to the advisor. I was like, this is what I want to major in. And it wasn't under the college at that time of Letters and Science. It was its own independent college that students in the 60s had protested to have formed and stuff. So they had, just wonderful faculty. And a lot of the faculty who taught in the ethnic studies and African American studies, Chicano studies, and Asian studies programs were just fabulous researchers and, well-known names in the field. So I got a wonderful education that way. It was very difficult for me, though, adjusting to life in an urban environment. And I got to a place of, relative comfort, but it was a struggle because I hadn't previously had to think about, personal safety in that way, and like not being able to walk or go where I needed to go when I needed to go somewhere. So it was a learning experience that way for sure.
So after you finished there, what did you do next?
So at that point, I had some really wonderful mentors, Native women who had taught there, and I thought, okay, no one in my family's, done this, but I managed to get a bachelor's, and at that point I had convinced my mom to go back to school. And so she was getting her bachelor's degree. She was at a community college and then going to be getting her bachelor's degree.
All right, and we're back, and we were talking about your educational path after you finished your undergraduate degree.
Yes. So because of these mentors, I decided to apply to graduate school, thinking, yes, I would like to teach in a Native Studies program. So at the time, there were 2 that I applied for, and now there's, of course, not hundreds, but so many. I applied to University of Arizona and UCLA. And University of Arizona had a really strong federal Indian law and policy program, and so I ended up going there. My mom transferred from the community college she was at in San Diego over there to complete her bachelor's. So we got to be roommates and help share expenses, which was really wonderful. Yeah. My sister had gone to college by then and started undergrad, and my brother was a senior in high school. So the 3 of us lived together, and we all worked to cover expenses and stuff. So that was a wonderful 2 years. I finished my master's, and then I had asked my advisor, who was actually a professor in the law school, but was also affiliated with the Indian Studies program, Rob Williams. Should I go to law school? Should I go, PhD? I'm thinking law school, I can teach with that. He goes, go to a PhD, you'll be much happier. So that wasn't the case. I ended up at the University of Oklahoma in the history department, and I was not happy. So I stopped my studies and went to law school at the University of Wisconsin, and definitely, like I say, with the mindset still that I'm going to teach between a Native Studies program and the law school. And then I went to the University of North Dakota with a legal fellowship that would allow me to work with tribes across the country implementing their tribal courts. But the dean at the law school also hired me to teach a couple of courses. So I taught an undergraduate introduction to law and co-taught a comparative law class with another professor there on comparing U.S. law as it applies to Native nations, Norwegian law as it applies to the Sami people, and then international law and what that offers Indigenous peoples. Because the University of North Dakota Law School had an exchange program with the University of in Oslo, Norway. And so we had students that came over, and so the class was half of those students and then half UND students. And so they'd pair up and work on a topic and let's say take like environmental law and look at the 2 countries and then internationally what was available. So after that experience and being there, I was like, I don't know that I really want to teach. I really have no desire to wait for tenure and spend these years like doing articles and kind of sitting on all these committees and all this stuff. I realized that I had more of an advocate's heart at that time. And so I left and went to Washington, D.C. I did some contract attorney work and then became the legislative director for the National Indian Health Board, which is a national nonprofit that works on behalf of all the federally recognized tribes, not just seeking more appropriations or funding for Indian health services, and obviously including those run by tribes, but also any bills that are being introduced that authorize services or anything related to healthcare in general that could have an impact on the healthcare provided to Native people. You know, like I say, within and by a tribe or by Indian Health Service or any other entity. So that was a wonderful experience. But then I really missed being out in Indian country. I got DC is a place where people work, you know,
Right.
6.5, 7 days a week. It was just nonstop. And I thought I need to have a little bit more of a life. So the National Indian Council on Aging, another national nonprofit, which is headquartered in Albuquerque and provides services and advocacy for American Indian and Alaska Native elders, they were looking for an executive director. And so I got hired there and I moved to Albuquerque and enjoyed that, you know, being out. I had been to Albuquerque many times and with the National Indian Health Board and just in my own travels, and I loved it. And so I really enjoyed living in New Mexico. That's where I met my husband. We had our son there. So I have wonderful friends. I have lots of good memories in my time there.
So when did you move back to Oklahoma?
Well, we lived there. I lived in New Mexico for 7.5 years. And then from there, we moved actually to Kansas City. So it was my husband's from Kansas. We were trying to get closer to family, but also, you know, that doesn't just happen without a job. And so my husband got a job in the Kansas City area. That put us, you know, within 4 hours of everyone in our family, which was really nice, except my mom, who after she graduated with her master's, got a job in Washington, D.C. So she had been out there. And when she was getting closer to retirement, she says, I can move near you in Kansas City, but your brother and sister have moved back to within the Cherokee Nation at home. And so it'd be great if you could get down there. And I said, well, you know, again, there's that thing called the job. Whereas I had left NICOA and I'd started my consulting business. So I was flexible to move anywhere. And then after I started writing for children, again, it's a job you can do anywhere. But my husband was able to get permission from a new supervisor that he got, because there are other people in his office that work remotely, if he could work remotely. And so that happened in the summer of 2018. They gave the permission and I said, okay, well, 2 weeks later, we had a house, you know, here in Oklahoma. And 2 weeks after that, we put our house in the Kansas City area on the market and we moved home, you know, in September of 2018. So not what I would advise someone to do when they have a book that comes out, is to move in the middle of the book launch and promotional season. But I really am happy that we're here, and we're all happy that we're here. You know, it's because now I live in the country again, like I did as a child. And so my son has the opportunity to be on the lake, you know, and fish and boat. And we're, you know, we have more deer and turkey around us than we do people, which I love, you know.
Yeah, it's beautiful here. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So with all of these different things that you had done, and these, it sounds like a rather demanding career, were you writing on the side?
No, not at all. I mean, I always wrote, obviously, for work,
right,
you know, professional writing and things. I had no writing for children until my son was almost 4. And I had been looking at, you know, I'd read him a number of books and told him stories. I was like, okay, I've been through all the Cherokee traditional stories. I've read him, you know, books that are traditional stories from other tribes, and where's the contemporary stories, you know, about Cherokee children and families in our communities now? And I couldn't find anything. And so that really sparked this, you know, drive in me to like, okay, I know they're here. And so I researched and there weren't any. So that's when I said, well, how do I go about this? And I called a friend from graduate school in Arizona who teaches in Michigan at a university. And I said, how do I go about doing this? I know you've published books for children and you've published a number of things. And he said, you need to join the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators when we get off the phone. And then whatever you're writing, you need to finish it. I will be glad to read it, one time. But you need to find, in essence, a cohort of people, a group of people that you can share your work with and get feedback from. And so at that time that this all is taking place, we've moved to Kansas City. So it was very fortuitous for me because there are a lot of published authors in children and in literature for children and teens in the Kansas City area. So I joined SCBWI, the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which is an international organization, and connected with the local chapter there. They have workshops and all kind of in-person meetups and stuff. So that's really where I got the mentoring to do this. From there, I learned who the other Native authors were, in the field. And at the time, there was really only, maybe a handful that were super active. Now, in the last couple of years, it's this burgeoning group of folks that are becoming published just in the last couple of years. So it's super exciting to see that. And I get contacted all the time by folks now. So writing for children is a very recent thing for me. I joined SCBWI in 2013. In the summer of 2015, I said, are you going to be a hobbyist at this? Or are you going to get serious about it? And really make time in your life to do this. And I made a commitment that I would do that. I went to a couple of writing workshop weekends and I was like, yeah, I could do this. And so from there, I wrote We Are Grateful, OOHRP Haliga in the fall of 2015, and I sold it in the spring, which is very fast for publishing. It doesn't normally happen that quickly. But it did take a while for it, to be out in the world because picture books take about 2 years or more, depending on the illustrator's schedule, So I sold it in April of 2016 and it came out in September of 2018.
Wow, so kind of a whirlwind journey. So tell me about the story and maybe the structure of it. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording. It's nonfiction. It's a concept book. And so there isn't, your story arc because, and you can have story arcs certainly in nonfiction, but this literally it starts in the fall with the Cherokee New Year and it goes through the 4 seasons. And it talks about what we're grateful for as Cherokee people. And that's not just wonderful things in our life, but also difficulties and hardships that we're, taught to be living in balance. And so we can't just be grateful when wonderful things happen to us, because at the same time, we're going to have struggles. And we have to be grateful for those too, because there are lessons there. We learn to develop resilience. We also learn interconnectedness, and the ability and the need to ask for help. So the book does that in the structure or setting of contemporary Cherokee culture. So there's a lot of aspects of Cherokee culture that are shared as well. But I would start, kind of each season with a phrase about kind of introducing the season and then saying, we are grateful, or Ojali Haliga, which is how you say we are grateful in Cherokee. And then there are little sub stanzas on each page that describe different things. And then at the end, in the author's note, I talk about kind of breaking through that stereotype of, us just living in some ancient time, because really we are invisible after 1900 in classroom texts and most literature. It's like somehow at the end of the Trail of Tears in 1839, we've disappeared, right? We all died off, and that's obviously not the case, but you wouldn't know it if you were reading most books or textbooks and things. There's some biographies of Will Rogers and Wilma Mankiller, but aside from that, we don't have that. So this is
absolutely centered in contemporary Cherokee life. And what I have found in sharing it with schools, doing school visits, book festivals, etc., is the number of people who are like, oh, okay, so you do some things differently, but we're more similar than we're not. And it's like, yes, and we're also your neighbors.
Right.
Our kids are in your classroom. Our kids are playing with your kids. In the community, and they're involved in sports and doing all these things. But without these kind of books, I experienced firsthand how dated or antiquated people's ideas are. I was in a school visit in March in Boston, and this young boy raised his hand after I had finished talking, and he said, "So you mean Cherokee people drive trucks and cars?" And I said, yes, as a matter of fact, we do. I drove one to the airport, and then I got on the plane to come and see you. And people where I live at home are doing this all the time,
Yeah.
And it like broke my heart, and I was incredulous in a way that I thought, oh my goodness, like there are Native people, just south of you,
Right.
Wampanoag, and I'm sad that you don't know, that they're driving cars and trucks and, doing those things too. So the importance of having more books where we're seen in a contemporary setting is critical.
The everyday
Yes.
aspect of it.
Absolutely.
There's a scene, well, the whole book is beautiful. We'll talk about your illustrator and kind of your journey with her in a minute. But there's there's a beautiful image of family gathered together and they're enjoying buttery bean bread and soup. And
Yes.
I just love that part because it just shows how
this winter
how we connect as human beings, but then also there's that cultural commentary that one can make with what we eat and what might be traditions.
Many families will gather around the table, right? And then you'll have grandma and grandpa who are sharing stories, the kids feeding the animals right from the table. I mean, these kinds of things happen and they're multi-generational, but you're right that it's being presented in a different context, so that kids go, oh, okay, so this is kind of a Cherokee version. Like these are some of the foods they would eat when they're sitting around sharing stories and talking. And as cold as it is today during this interview, I'm like,
I know.
Actually, that sounds pretty good.
I think I've been that question a long time ago, but that sounds
like some steamy almond soup and bean bread sounds really good.
Let's have that for lunch. And you also included the Cherokee language in the book with the transliterations and then with like a pronunciation guide.
Right.
Which I thought was very, I shouldn't be giving my opinion, but I thought it was very inclusive because you don't always see that moment, that learning moment.
Well, it's funny
books.
because, again, I had this collection of picture books about Cherokee people, and the publisher Charles Bridge actually had done a book back in 1994 called EJ Selu, the Cherokee Harvest Festival. And they had Cherokee words at the bottom, the page, and it would have the pronunciation. And I thought, well, okay, this is, just how it is. So when I wrote this book, I thought, of course, I'll integrate Cherokee words, in the style of that book. I did end up submitting this book to Charles Bridge, and that's who published it, but I sent it to like 10 publishers. And it didn't occur to me that it wouldn't come that way. But then there were other publishers who were interested in the book who were like, well, we'd like to take the Cherokee out. And I was like, then that's a different book. That's not this book, because what I'm trying to do is integrate the language, as we would use it. But one of the things that earlier book that Charles Bridge printed did not have was the syllabary. And children at our tribal school, and of course anyone who's learning the language, learns the language through the syllabary. Because Cherokee is not like English, where we take letters to make words. We take syllables to make words or phrases. So actually, this title is the exact same thing 3 times. So you have We Are Grateful in English. You have the transliteration, the 6 syllables. And then these are the 6 syllables in the syllabary as you would learn them as a Cherokee person. So O, ja, ja, li, li, hey, hey, li, li, ga. And, I wanted that to be an educational thing, not that kids reading the book are somehow all going to become fluent in this, but just to recognize that different people think about the world and how they express it differently. And Sequoia created this language. And I also wanted to spotlight that because I don't know if that he's the only person, but he's definitely one of only maybe a handful of people that have taken a language and created the written form of it, by himself. We're teaching it to his daughter. And so in the back, I include the Cherokee Nation's poster that they have that has got the syllabary with the syllables next to it. So that's, what they teach. And I just think it's important for children to have that. The audiobook version of this that came out this summer in 2019 is fabulous because there are 4 other Cherokee people that join me in recording the book. And the 2 younger people graduated from the Tribal Immersion School. They're doing background voices in some of the scenes. So when the family is like raking leaves and they're out in the fall spread, there's background talking from the kids in Cherokee. And so there's a couple of different scenes like that, or when they're playing stickball. So there's Cherokee music that's integrated. There's sounds from the stomp dance on that scene, that spread in the book. It gives it a whole nother layer, I think. So, having the words in the book is one thing, but then also being able to hear them spoken. And then, like I say, the background addition of the words is not anything I anticipated, but I love it.
Yeah, it's a good way to preserve it too, and just let people immerse themselves in it. And the artwork is just gorgeous. So tell me about your illustrator and how that, because did the publisher select?
The publisher asked me for a list of Native illustrators, and I sent that to them, and they said, because in trade publishing, the publisher, buys your words as the writer, and unless you're the author illustrator, they will hire an illustrator for it because they kind of have a vision for how the book it will be. So typically, the author and the illustrator never talk. At some point, the author may get sketches and look those over just to make sure that nothing's offline with the story. But really, I've told my part of the story. And so now it's the illustrator's part to take and do 50% or more of the story really in the pictures. So I was asked to give a few names of non-Native illustrators in case the Native illustrators weren't available or, their style didn't fit what they were thinking for the book. So Fernay was one of those names, and she and I share the same literary agency. So by the time we got to hiring an illustrator for the book, I had gotten literary representation. I sold this book unagented, and I saw her work, and I thought, she really takes time to research the places, and she's very thorough in how she depicts things. That she goes far beyond what the words provide. So there's a lot of detail in all the pictures. And she was an absolute delight to work with. She came on her own dime from Australia. She grew up in New Jersey, but she lives in West Australia now. She married an Australian man. And so she came to Tahlequah, and I was living in Kansas City. So I'd come down from there, and we went, around the Cherokee Nation. I introduced her to numerous people, and she shared her sketches. So she was very open to feedback. It's not a normal process. Normally, like I say, all of this is done through the editor or art director, and the 2 of us would never have spoken. But the fact that almost no one knows anything about Cherokee people, within the publishing industry or Native people in general, you have to do a lot more education and helping them with accessing correct research materials, getting, them to the right people. Because even just Googling Cherokee on the internet produces people in headdresses and things that we don't wear. So you can't just say, well, you research it and you'll figure it out. It's like, no, I can get you to folks who can show you what, turtle shell shakers look like. The things that you need to to know to do this correctly. Right. And like I say, she was a quick study, very open to everyone's suggestions. And I think you really see that reflected in the art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's dynamic and colorful.
It is. And, I don't have visual artistic abilities where I could do any of that kind of artwork. But I knew since it was a 4 seasons book, I wanted it to be colorful. And this is my favorite spread in the book. So, Cherokee people at night around at the stomp grounds. And I just love the color. This is a night scene, and yet there's so much color. But every scene is like that. It's just a feast for the eyes.
Oh yeah, with the young readers, we've got to talk about a tough crowd.
Exactly.
A little kid's attention.
Yeah, so they lose themselves in it, finding all the different details. So I enjoy it.
But that's not your only book or project.
No.
What happened next? You've been so busy since you started this.
Yeah, I've sold quite a few books since then. And like I say, picture books take a long time to come out. Mm-hmm. So the next book I sold was in the fall of 2016, and it just came out. So this one took not quite 3 years, but almost. And that's At the Mountain's Base. And it is my first fiction book. Mm-hmm. It is a 111-word poem. Oh. That's circular. So we start at the mountain's base and we end at the mountain's base. And it's about a Cherokee family waiting for a family member to come home out of battle. Mm-hmm. And I wrote the poem with the mindset that, again, trying to shine that light and bring forward what is invisible. Mm-hmm. And, within Native nations and their citizens, there's definitely an awareness of and being proud of and celebrating our veterans and active duty service members. That's not the case so much in the mainstream, society. But even within our, Native nations, I don't think we put a lot of attention on women that have served. And so I really wanted to highlight that. So I did intentionally make the pilot a woman. Mm-hmm. And the illustrator chose to have the family that was waiting for her is a grandma with her, what appeared to me to be like her granddaughters gathered with her, And I didn't say what tribe the family would be. Because again, I know as the author, it's like I have to leave room for the illustrator. And I didn't know if there would be a native, or non-native illustrator, what tribe they might choose. And so Washoyo Alvitre, the illustrator, is from the Tongva tribe in California. And she learned weaving from her grandmother. And so she was talking about how they weave with plant matter. And I said, we do that too. We've got buckbrush, honeysuckle, river cane that we weave baskets. And she said, do you have other kinds of weaving? I said, well, actually, we do finger weaving with yarn, and we also have loom weaving. And so she said, tell me more about finger weaving. So she started researching that and decided to make the family Cherokee, which I was really happy about. And so if you lift the dust jacket for the case cover, you'll see
beautiful,
this gorgeous finger weaving pattern. And during, so it's again, where kind of the books are a collaborative process, I'm sending her videos about finger weaving and articles and things about Cherokee people doing this. The publisher, Namrata Chapati, emails me and she says, hey, do you know about this woman, Millie Rexroth, who was Oglala Lakota, and she was in the Women's Air Force Service Pilots program in World War II. And I was like, no, I don't. No. So we ended up, because I had wanted to put, I didn't submit it with an author's note, but I ended up, I said I want to put a paragraph in about how American Indian women serve at higher rates than their percentage of the overall population, just as Native Americans in general do that are in the armed forces. But I wanted that paragraph in. Well, then she says, well, we could put this, we could also put in about Millie. So then I added that actually there was a Native American woman, who served, who was a pilot in World War II. So then it kind of set the book during that time frame. So it's set, in the 40s. And, but what I love is Washoyo used her grandmother as the model for the grandma in the story, but yet my great grandma cooked on this same wood stove the entire time she was alive, and she passed in the fall of '92. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, that's my great grandma's stove. And so there's a lot of things in here that like I say, I recognize. But she's a comics graphics artist, and I didn't know about her. So the publisher actually found her. I sent them my list of native illustrators, and they said, well, we found this comics graphics artist. And I was like, for a poem? I don't see how that would work, right? It was the perfect fit. And this is why I'm not, the person who designs books. Because her use of panels, taking words and focusing and just bringing you into, at the mountain's base, there's a cabin. Inside the cabin, it's a kitchen. And it takes you into the story. And the fact that she uses the double page spread, which is normally, so typical in a picture book, she uses it so sparingly, it has this like maximum effect. And I absolutely love it. Yeah. So anyway, there's just so many things that she, in essence, took the image of weaving, the grandmother's weaving this this belt, and wove together in this book. That
it's this visual, a visual rhythm. The way
it is, it really is. It takes the poem to a whole other level that I never anticipated. Because when I wrote it, I thought, how is someone going to illustrate this? And again. When I'm writing, I think of the story as kind of like a movie in my head. Yeah. And does the action and does it seem, like the river's flowing and I'm helping people, stay on the journey, but I can't visualize what that's going to necessarily look like on the paper. And I had no clue how this was going to come out. Yeah. And so when I saw her work, I was like, oh.
Yeah. I think that's the kind of the exciting and scary thing about collaborations. Yeah. The final product is going to probably be a surprise. Which
it is. And it's fun. So far it's been a million times better than I would have imagined, just because, you write these words and you feel this certain thing, again, fiction or nonfiction for me, or a poem. And then someone takes that and manifests it in this completely brilliant other way beyond what you had in mind. And it's like, wow. So it's, that's why picture books are one of my very favorite things, is that it is the perfect marriage of word and art together. And I love that.
Yeah, it's great. So the other book I wanted to talk about was Indian No More. So this is kind of another unique maybe situation in terms of how this book got written. Right.
So Indian No More is written by my friend Charlene Willing McManus, and it says with Traci Sorell. So the background behind that is Charlene is from the Umpqua tribe, and which is part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, which are like 29 tribes that got removed to this area in Northwest Oregon, the reservation. And in the 1950s, during the federal policy for termination, when the federal government terminated 109 tribes, hers was one of those. And at the same time, the federal government had a relocation policy. So they were having people, offering them, you can move from your tribal homelands to a city, we'll help you find a job, get classes if you need that, etc. And basically to assimilate and integrate them into city life. And so there were people, in different pockets of Indian country experiencing a lot of economic insecurity, and that was attractive to them, even though difficult to leave home. And certainly for people in Oklahoma who are familiar with Wilma Mankiller, that's what happened with her family, right? They moved from northeastern Oklahoma to San Francisco. So Charlene's tribe was terminated and her family moved to Los Angeles. So Indian No More is a story she wrote. It's not autobiographical or even semi-autobiographical, because she interviewed other people from her tribe and kind of combined different experiences. But it does mirror her experience of moving from there to Los Angeles. And so the story follows Regina Pettit, who is getting ready to go into 5th grade. and finds her family, moving from the community she's known forever and having to establish her life and herself in Los Angeles. And as someone who did that myself, moving from here, I very much related to the character. But I had received an email from Charlene saying, my cancer's returned. They don't know if I will be around to do the revisions and get the book ready for publication. I've talked to my publisher. Would you be willing to finish the book and get it published? And I was like, whoa, I know you're going to be fine. There was a part of me that just could not believe that that would be the case at all. And so I had to take some time, to think about that. And I said, no, I said, yes, I can do this. I had talked to my agent. I'd sent the manuscript to my agent before I read it. And I said, do you think I can do this? Because I had been writing picture books, not historical fiction, middle grade prose novels, right?
Yeah.
That's a very different type of writing. And she said, yes, I think, you can. And she, being a former editor before she was an agent, has a lot of tools and skills in her toolbox to assist me with that. But Charlene died not long after I agreed to do the book. So we had one phone call. Oh. And then her husband sent a box of, newspaper articles, thumb drives, photographs. And then it was like, okay, I have to get to work on this. And so that's what I spent last fall through the spring doing. And then it just came out in September, a week after At the Mountain's Base. So it's an important book because it's, not, only a way for people to learn about termination and relocation, which no one talks about, no one knows about.
Yeah.
But it really is an important part of her legacy because so few people have any idea that this is going on during the time of the Cold War and civil rights movement. And yet, all these things are impacting Native people, and we don't have any awareness of that. It's not being taught, in our classrooms or even in mainstream culture. Anybody has any idea that this is happening at the same time as those events?
Yeah, and just down to the level of the prose or the way it's written, it's so lyrical and striking, and I know it's for middle grade, but it's it almost feels a little bit like you're reading poetry, like the opening chapter, The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Before being terminated, I was in it. Could we just read that first? Because it's just it's just, well, I think draws you in whether you know anything about this,
right,
or not, adult or a kid.
Yeah, and that's what captivated me. Was it's like as soon as I started reading it, I fell in love with Regina's voice.
Oh yeah,
and I thought, oh my gosh, this book has to be out in the world. So yes, chapter 1, The Walking Dead. Before being terminated, I was Indian. Now, certainly, I don't mean I was killed off or anything. It was 1954. The United States government didn't do that anymore. They just filed away our tribal roll numbers, erased our reservation from the map. What were our tribal roll numbers? They were the numbers the government assigned to its citizens and used by the federal government to see who belonged to the tribe. So my number verified I was Regina Pettit, roll number 3669, daughter of John Pettit, roll number 858, granddaughter of Maud Pettit, roll number 25, and Sid Pettit, roll number 18. And that was what made you Indian to the U.S. government. Numbers. Even after all that counting, the government chose to terminate us. I really don't know all the reasons why, but my chich, my grandmother, said this much. Termination means we're the walking dead. Now I ask you, how can we be dead if we're still walking? And it's like after I read that, I was like, I want to go wherever Regina's going to take me.
Yeah.
I have to know like how this comes about. And like I say, it was a wonderful experience, to work on the book, although bittersweet and heartbreaking, because normally if you collaborate and co-write with someone, you can talk to them about things. And so, but Charlene still guided me, in finishing this book. And one of the things that was really nice this summer, I had to be in Los Angeles for a conference. And so I got to go to her old neighborhood and see the elementary school and the street she lived on, which are talked about in the book, to see how things have changed and how some things haven't changed,
Yeah, definitely a part of
Mm-hmm.
American history, a history here that
Definitely.
we don't
No.
talk about.
No.
And that's, I think, one of the great things about.
And it's why, we have such a large population of people. Over 2/3 of us live outside of our tribal homelands, is because of policies like termination and the Indian relocation program. And again, people don't know that. I mean, certainly there were vets that came back from World War I or World War II, with job opportunities that stayed, in cities or other places. But during this time period, there's a lot of folks that end up, moving that didn't want to, and then what are the repercussions for their families, their identity, their tribal nation, the land base, because as has happened with Grand Ron and many others, in essence, what happened when the U.S. says we're terminating your tribe, it means we're no longer going to not only recognize you as a tribe, but the land that you live on, your citizens live on, is no longer, protected for you. So then individual tribal citizens have to purchase that land or vacate. And at the marked up price, Charlene and other people could not do that. So there's this huge displacement that really isn't a voluntary participation in the relocation program, because what are they going to do?
Right.
They're now homeless, So it's a part of American history that people need to know about. And I feel like the book is accessible to a variety of readers, not just, of course, middle grade, but adults who need to know what has happened, that they probably aren't going to read a bunch of academic books to find out about, like I had to in college or graduate school.
Yeah, and just the voice,
Yes.
the voice of
Regina.
this writer.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
We'll draw you in.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about the process that you've had to go through, writing these books and getting them published. What do you think you've learned about yourself so far as a writer at this point of your journey?
That I love challenges and I love variety.
Yeah.
So, which is good. And that I do have a thicker skin, even though sometimes I may not think I do. Rejection is part of the game, you know, not just, like if you submit something and a publisher is not interested in it and you have to submit it somewhere else, but also just not everyone's going to love everything you've written, you know, and I knew that, because I had been edited so much, like with prior work. And of course, like I say, in undergrad and graduate school with papers I'd written. But I really like that I can write for a variety of ages, from writing board books for your kind of 0 to 3 to, picture books, middle grade, young adult. So all of across that. And then across a variety of genres and learning how to, write various types of fiction and then nonfiction and poems. I have to constantly challenge myself and kind of figure out new ways of not keeping myself interested, but just saying, have I looked at that? Do I want to do that? Also, I look at where are the gaps in representation. And then that prompts me to come up with new book ideas as well. So that's the part I like. But I really also love the group of people that write for children and teens.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah,
the literary community and how you connect.
Yeah.
with them.
I hear, and I don't know this because I don't operate in the adult circles, but people who write for adults, say that it is not as close or congenial as it is in what we call the kidlit world. And so I'm grateful, that I'm with people that are very generous, and I love the group of Native writers that are in the field now, and then the ones that are coming into the field. We have a wonderful group of folks that are producing just great work. So it's fun to have critique groups now with other Native people. When I first started, I was like, I don't have anyone that I can share my stuff with, and now I'm in critique groups with 4 and 5 people at a time, and we're sharing, our work and getting feedback on it. And that feels fabulous. And my hope is to just keep growing that number and keep mentoring people to come into the field and to share information, because the biggest gatekeeper is just not having knowledge of how things work. And once you break that down, you can make a decision of if you want to be involved or not. But for myself, it can be intimidating trying to figure out where all of that, how that all happens and how that plays out. So I'm grateful to Cynthia Leidick-Smith, who has been a wonderful mentor to me. She, has been so forthcoming with information. She's a Muskogee Creek citizen, and I will forever be, just cherish her presence in my life. She's been in the field for over 20 years. Joseph Bruchak is another one that's been a wonderful cheerleader. He's been writing since the 60s in the field. But like I say, there's a number of writers who are newer to literature for children and teens like myself, and we're constantly checking in with each other, on social media or text. And like I say, we do online video critique groups, and I love that. And we'll meet up when we can. There's a conference every spring in New York called the Color of Children's Literature Conference that Quayle Journal puts on. A lot of Native authors and illustrators show up there. So it's great to have time in person too.
Yeah. So do you have a daily writing routine or writing rituals? How do you get it done?
No.
And when? That's something else we've kind of talked about. You've got your seasons.
Yes,
of
yes,
writing,
yes.
right?
I absolutely am not one of those people. I know that, there are folks who say, I write every day, I get up at this time, even if I'm on the road. That is absolutely not how I operate. I can revise things that I've already sold or I've already written, if I'm on the road, but I cannot create anything new when I'm on the road. I need to be home and in a very still, quiet place. So it's good for me to just have blocks of time where I'm not doing appearances, and where I'm home for 2 days and then I'm on the road, doing school visits or a book festival or a conference, signings, etc. And I'm really excited because winter is one of those times when you don't have as many visits and appearances. And so I've blocked off, that for 2.5 months, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just writing. Summer tends to be kind of similar, that although my son's out of school then, and so we end up spending time together and doing things, but I absolutely rely on having blocks where I just don't do anything. And if I get, down to a deadline and I'm traveling a lot, I'll have to sometimes just go stay in a hotel for a weekend and have absolutely nothing else I do except write, to get something done. But I don't prefer to do it that way, but I certainly can, and I have. Yeah. I've written a couple books that way.
And then there's your name, as we talked about this before recording today. There's Traci Sorell,
right?
The author persona.
Yes.
Right? And then there's the Traci who,
is
out and about in the
Absolutely.
community and
Absolutely.
that kind of thing.
So that's the part of me, for me, that has been, I think, the bigger challenge. And I don't want to say it's not so positive, but it's been a harder adjustment. I think probably the hardest adjustment because, I'm used to really not having such a public persona. I mean, it's not that I haven't done obviously national work in the past and people have known who I am, but now it's like I have to have a website, you've got to have a social media presence, and you have to be available to folks in a way that I haven't had to be available before. And so that can be difficult to kind of shut that off and be Traci who's, riding in her pajamas at home or wearing sweats to go to the store,
Right.
And then you interact with people who, expect you to, be as you are on your website or when you're out in public and, coiffed and put together. And I'm like, no, that's Traci Sorell. And so over there, because I have, a pen name, my legal name is Traci McClellan Sorell, and I was Traci Sorell McClellan forever. I got married later in life. So this is a newer, thing for me. And then, like I say, to just have a public presence and accessibility and all of this is definitely something that I would say I'm still getting used to.
It's a lot. You need that winter time.
Yes, I do. I absolutely do.
To just sit kind of relax. What's the best writing advice that you've been given and that you could give other people too?
I mean, it's something that thankfully I developed a love for as a child, and that's reading.
Mm-hmm. You
are not going to be a good writer if you're not reading. You need to be reading all the time, and that doesn't necessarily mean, books in the genre or the type of writing that you're doing, but just reading other people's writing, because one of the exercises that we had to do at a workshop I went to, which was very useful, is like, start before you sit down to write, have a couple of books that you really respect that person's work, that you feel like are really well written, and read a little bit out of it. Or if it's a picture book, read the whole thing, just to kind of remind you that it's like, yes, this is what good writing, is like. And it's, oftentimes lyrical, right? There's movement. You've got sensory details that are involved. It takes you on a journey, and if you're not reading, I think it's harder to get in that place of being able to write and convey information, because when you're reading good writing, you go, yeah, okay, that's what I need to do. Mm-hmm. In my own way, in your own voice, right. Of course. But the other part is definitely leaning toward risk instead of away from it. Accepting that, the use of emotion, whether that's raucous laughter or sadness or anger, whatever, will convey so much. And so some of that, like in a picture book, is brought out in the art, but that's also happens in the words. There's a feeling that you want to evoke in the reader, and a journey that, like I said, that you're going to take them on. And so don't shy away from doing that, because that's what makes people connect to a book. The reason that you were captivated by Regina's voice is that character, what I'm saying? Like, that character is fully formed, yes. And how she expresses herself and the things she's going through. You're right there with her the whole time. And I even felt that with the other characters, it's like I knew, things about them, and I knew what they were feeling and their backstory. And so, like I say, to finish the book and get it ready, I was happy to do that. But you've got to be vulnerable, or you don't get to that place. And then the book suffers as a result. Your story suffers. And that's where you can spend a ton of time on revision. You're going to be revising anyway, right? But you could eliminate some revision by just risking and being vulnerable and conveying that emotion, like I say, in whatever it is, whether it's laughter or sadness, anger, etc., from the get-go.
What encouragement would you give to writers in Oklahoma, maybe especially young writers and Native writers?
Okay. This is a great time to be a writer in Oklahoma. I recently spoke at the Tulsa City County Library's first local author mini conference, and it's something that they're looking to expand, and I certainly hope it continues. But in doing that, I wanted to give those attending, if they weren't already actively writing, a list of local resources, groups and people that they could contact for support and things. And there's a lot, in our area. I mean, people in Oklahoma are extremely creative. And you look at people on the national scene, whether it's writers or actors, people in, singing, in a variety of different artistic outlets that have come from here. So, we're definitely good at telling stories, Right. So there's no reason not to engage. There's resources available. The other thing I would say is that I haven't met anyone who wasn't engaged in that who couldn't be successful at it. If you're willing to put in the hard work. And that's another thing where I feel like, especially when I talk with other Native writers, it's like, you can't not remember those sacrifices your ancestors have made. Mm-hmm. And so really, how hard is it to push yourself to be vulnerable, to write, to do those things? That's a lot easier than having to give up your whole home, right? And in the winter, move to Indian territory, and leave everything behind. So that's a fortitude that we carry with us as we do our work, on a daily basis, monthly, yearly basis, throughout the 4 seasons. And I think that it's just something that I continually remind myself. And I would say, like I say, for anyone within the state, there are resources. There's writer groups. I'm teaching a course at the Center for Writers and Poets, OSU Tulsa. And so they have a number of teaching artists that are involved in this. And this isn't a college course, right? It's not, you come and you're up for a whole semester. These are short-term courses that they're offering, they're in Tulsa. And I love that because they're specifically designed for the general public to come and, mine will be a 4-week session on picture books. They have other ones on writing flash fiction, how to write a screenplay. That's fabulous, right? It's a wonderful introduction at a very low cost. And there's scholarships available that you can come in and say, is this something I'd be interested in? Let me give it a try. I would have loved to, have had things like that earlier in my life. But I really wasn't thinking about needing a creative outlet. I took all my creativity and kind of put it into my work, my 9-to-5 job, or as it was, my 7-day-a-week job.
Yeah.
And now, I see that need for the balance. So this is, in essence, my day job, right, is the creative life. But for people in Oklahoma, I would say whatever it is, writing or illustrating or doing spoken word, writing screenplays, jump in and check it out. The library is your best friend. You can get things through interlibrary loan if you're in a small rural area and stuff. But, that's, get connected to people on the internet. There's a number of Facebook groups that are around. Certainly the Kidlit community is very active on there. I just don't see that there are as many barriers to finding information and to accomplishing those goals if that's what you really want to do, which is really nice. We're more accessible now, I would say, with information and access to see if it's something that you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's great to hear, and I think great encouragement to have recorded here today. So what are you working on currently? What's next?
I am working on a middle grade novel in verse and fiction, and then I'm hoping to write my first young adult novel next year. I have a few more picture books that I need to get written, fiction and nonfiction. And I'd also love to tackle a chapter book series next year, because we really have no chapter book series out on the market that feature contemporary Native people, So I can write one about Cherokees or a variety of, kids from other nations, et cetera. But I feel the need to work on that. And that's something I tell other people too. I'm like, we need chapter book series. I hear this all the time, as kids transition to reading on their own, but they're not quite ready for those prose novels. We need those. So it's another way to stretch and, figure out how to write that, because that's very different writing from the picture books, or like I say, a prose, middle grade novel.
Well, we've covered a lot today. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we haven't mentioned that you'd like to say?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I certainly would encourage, like I say, any young people listening to this, as well as anyone of any age, but that regardless of where you have come from or your family's background or your financial situation, you absolutely can pursue a creative life. It may not be something you do full time. I think it can be difficult to choose as a full time career, just given the fact that people need health benefits. Until we get to some kind of universal health care, which I think would open up people to have more opportunities for entrepreneurship, or as I call myself, an authorpreneur. That there can be some barriers in that sense, but it is so fulfilling, to have a creative outlet that even if you don't pursue it full time, learning to write poetry or writing poetry, writing short stories, it just can feed your soul in a way that's beautiful. And like I say, people in Oklahoma are storytellers. So, we're all born from story, but I find that there is a richness that comes from this very complicated past that we've had here. And we have a lot of stories that have been suppressed and not told and need to be told. And so I would encourage anyone to start highlighting and telling those stories, because they're very important.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Traci. This was wonderful.
Thank you.